order. Welcome to meeting number 20 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Industry, Science and Technology. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of January 25th, 2021. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website, so you're aware the webcast will only show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. To ensure an orderly meeting, I'd like to outline the usual rules. Members and witnesses may speak in the official language of their choice. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. If you're on video conference, please click on the microphone icon to unmute yourself. And when you are not speaking, your mic should be on mute. A reminder that all comments by members and witnesses should be addressed through the chair. As is my normal practice, I will hold up the yellow card for when you have 30 seconds remaining and the red card for when your time for your intervention has expired. We have a very full agenda this morning, and I understand two witness groups have to leave at noon. So therefore, I'm going to ask you to please respect the time so that everyone can get a turn. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Tuesday, December 1st, 2020, the committee is meeting today to study the domestic manufacturing capacity for COVID-19 vaccine. I'd like to now welcome our witnesses. Today we have Dr. Mona Niemeyer, Chief Science Advisor, Brian Lichte, Associate Professor, McMaster University, Karen Mossman, Vice President, Research at McMaster University. From Precision's Nanosystems, James Taylor, CEO, and Andrew Booth, Chairman. From Medicago, Nakashi Nagao, President and CEO, and Nicolas Petit, Vice President, Commercial Operations, and Dr. Gary Kobinger, University of Laval. Each witness will present for up to 7 minutes, followed by a round of questions. We will start with Dr. Niemeyer. You have 7 minutes.
Madam Chair, point of order.
Yes. Mr. Dreeshen, you have a point of order?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to know which of the witnesses would only be here for the 1 hour so that we could look at our questions in that manner.
Absolutely. So Dr. Niemeyer has to leave at noon, as does Medicago. Thank you. Dr. Niemeyer, you have the floor for 7 minutes.
Thank you very much. Bonjour, merci Madame la Présidente, et merci aux membres du comité.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to members of the committee to be with you this morning. Since my last appearance before this committee in December 2017, I fulfilled my first mandate and was subsequently reappointed for a 2-year term in September 2020.
I will not go into the details of my mandate, but as the science advisor to the Prime Minister and Cabinet, I will say that the past year has been largely devoted to advice related to the COVID-19 health crisis. Of course, the pandemic is an extremely complex situation with numerous facets. It's all the more challenging when it's due to a new virus about which we know very little. Which is why, in order to help inform my advice, I established a multidisciplinary scientific advisory group early on. We focused on areas ranging from COVID-19 diagnostics and research needs to aerosol transmission, infection in children, and long-term care settings. Researchers were mobilized and willing to generously share their findings and advice. As a result, science has guided decision-making in real time like I have never seen before. The COVID-19 expert panel, made up of distinguished researchers and practitioners in infectious disease, in disease modeling, behavioral sciences from across the country, held its first meeting on March 10. It has met since more than 40 times, and panel members also participated in several targeted task forces to which additional experts contributed. This ensured a coordinated and integrated science advice mechanism. Throughout, an impressive number of scientists and health practitioners have generously contributed their time and expertise for the service of their country. Par ailleurs, mon bureau a
My office also helps set up the CAN COVID network to further stimulate COVID research and partnerships. The network boasts over 3,000 members across the country and has been very successful in fostering cross-disciplinary collaboration and innovation. In addition to domestic outreach, I have been in regular communication with my international counterparts. We shared information on disease spread and containment, knowledge gaps, research activities and priorities, as well as clinical studies. This kept us all up to date on the latest developments worldwide.
Early in the pandemic, several clinical studies aimed at treating or preventing COVID-19 and its complications using existing drugs got underway, but the results were mostly disappointing. Attention increasingly focused on vaccine development for disease prevention. In Canada, federal funds were allocated as early as March and April 2020 for vaccine and therapeutic development through the Canadian Institute of Health Research and the Department of Innovation, Science and Industry. COVID-19 vaccine development, manufacturing, and distribution were topics I discussed extensively with my international counterparts, including those in the UK and the US. And it became evident to me that independent expert advice on vaccine development and procurement was needed, which is why I recommended the creation of the Vaccine Task Force. Composé de 11 membres de
Made up of 11 members of Canada's vaccine research community and 4 ex officio members, of which I am one, the task force has been instrumental in helping to identify and prioritize vaccine candidates, support domestic vaccine development, and inform supply chain coordination.
I have participated in the vast majority of the task force meetings, and I will say that I have always been completely satisfied with the scientific rigor that framed their deliberations. Like so many others in Canada's scientific community, these researchers were ready and willing to step up and contribute pro bono their time and expertise to helping fight this health crisis. As a result, Canada has now a diverse portfolio of the leading effective vaccines from 3 different technologies. I believe that Canadians have been well served by this remarkable group. The only downside to the amazing feat of vaccine against COVID-19 development is that the first of these vaccines came from outside the country. The fact that Canada has modest human vaccine production capabilities is not news. It's a problem that has existed for nearly 4 decades. As a scientist, I have spent most of my career in biopharmaceutical research, and sadly, I have witnessed the decline of our country's therapeutic development capacity over much of that time. It does not have to be this way. Therapeutic development, whether vaccines or drugs, it's a lengthy and complex process requiring dynamic collaboration between researchers, clinicians, governments, and private sector organizations. The rewards, as seen in this pandemic, are well worth the efforts. Canada has exquisite assets to support a thriving biomanufacturing ecosystem, from world-renowned scientists who continue to make critical discoveries in biomedical and pharmaceutical sciences to innovative SMEs with promising products. But taking a discovery from the lab to the community or scaling up drug and vaccine production for human use are not trivial undertakings. Avec les besoins en santé,
It is my hope that the health needs and science successes witnessed during this pandemic will encourage us to put in place the resources and infrastructure to take our discoveries into innovative health products manufactured in Canada for Canadians, but also for the world.
Capacity will not happen overnight, but it is vital that we work towards it, and now is the time to establish the strategies and act on them. Science gave us hope and the tools to overcome this crisis, from diagnostics to vaccines and therapeutics. We in Canada have much to offer to fight this and future health threats. I look forward to the extraordinary opportunities that lie ahead. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you very much. I now invite McMaster University to present. You have 7 minutes.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And I would like to thank all of you for inviting me and my colleague, Dr. Brian Lichty, to appear today to discuss domestic manufacturing capacity for COVID-19 vaccine. My name is Dr. Karen Mossman, and I am the Vice President for Research at McMaster University. I'm also a professor in medicine and a virologist by training. Very early on, my team was involved in isolating SARS-CoV-2, the agent responsible for the outbreak of COVID-19. Isolating and propagating the virus has enabled researchers across Canada and the world to better understand the virus and work on potential solutions.
Pardon, Monsieur le Président, mais on n'a plus de traduction présentement.
At McMaster, our researchers.
Dr. Mossman, can you double check what language are you on the bottom of your screen? We're having some trouble with translation.
I have English selected.
Perfect. Mr. Simald, I'm speaking in English. Are you getting it in French? Yes, perfect. Please go ahead, Dr. Mossman.
Thank you. At McMaster, our researchers pivoted quickly to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic, with most of the research coming from the newly launched Canada's Global Nexus for Pandemics and Biological Threats. This includes working on the development of home test kits, leading a national trial for plasma transfusion, and leading a trial on anti-coronavirus therapies. A great deal of work is being done across the university to innovate respiratory ventilators and N95 masks. Thanks to funding from CHR and CFI, my own lab is currently studying SARS-CoV-2 pathogenesis. This pandemic has exposed significant gaps in Canada's domestic biomanufacturing capacity. While important steps are being taken to correct this imbalance in the future, we believe that action can be taken now to ensure that Canada can produce its own vaccines without the need to solely rely on international partners. McMaster is home to the Robert Fitzhenry Vector Laboratory. Founded 17 years ago, this biomanufacturing facility is currently producing a made in Canada COVID-19 vaccine, which, pending approval, will be ready for clinical trials in the spring. This second generation vaccine candidate has been designed to provide broader anti-coronavirus immunity to aid in protection against variants and potential future pandemic coronaviruses. The research into this vaccine candidate is Canadian, the IP is Canadian, and we hope the production will be Canadian. Investment will be key to growing Canada's vaccine manufacturing capacity. McMaster's facility could and should play a role in Canada's biomanufacturing future. With support, the facility could be upgraded in a matter of months to produce on the order of 1 million doses of a vaccine per production run. McMaster University has recently partnered with the University of Saskatchewan and Vito Intervac to approach pandemic preparedness from a position of strength. Together, we urge the government to invest in our proposals, which build on decades of excellence in infectious disease research. I will now pass it over to my colleague, Dr. Brian Lichty, who is the director of the Robert E. Fitzhenry Vector Laboratory and who can speak more to the work being done there.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to address this committee. The Robert E. Fitzhenry Vector Facility is designed to produce adenoviral vectored vaccines. These will be similar to the AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson vaccines, and actually CanSino and the Sputnik vaccine, for example. McMaster pioneered the genetic engineering of adenoviral vaccine vectors decades ago, and all such vaccines are essentially based on Canadian technologies that were initially developed at McMaster. The facility was originally designed to produce vaccines for phase 1-2 testing, and in the past has manufactured vaccines for infectious disease and oncology clinical trials in humans, as well as veterinary trials in oncology. This work has allowed McMaster to license technology to industry and recently to spin out a biotech company that now employs over 60 scientists and technical staff in Ontario. Our team is currently manufacturing 2 second-generation adenoviral vector COVID vaccines designed to provide a broader immunity against 3 SARS-CoV-2 proteins. This design is expected to provide immunity to vaccinees across components or against components which are less able to change and are conserved across the arising variants and even potential pandemic coronavirus species that are present in Asian bat populations. McMaster has also pioneered methods to administer these vaccines through inhalation, using a device analogous to a puffer. and this would boost immunity within the lung where it is needed most. Importantly, this route of administration allows for a much lower dose of vaccine to be effective, and our planned trial will incorporate this route of administration. In closing, I'd like to express my gratitude for the rapid response to COVID-19 from the government and all parties. A robust domestic manufacturing capacity for vaccines is pivotal for Canada, not only to ensure Canadians have timely access to life-saving vaccines, but also from an IP, innovation, and national security point of view. We have a great foundation for domestic manufacturing capacity in Canada. We see a path forward to creating a dynamic ecosystem. McMaster has initiated conversations with NRC about the new Royal Mount facility, and we see a tremendous opportunity for small academic facilities like ourselves to position ourselves better as feeder facilities for these larger biomanufacturing centers. This would allow the future Canadian ecosystem to be nimble and better poised to develop and test new technologies. Decisions made in the near future will determine whether this capacity will meet the needs of future pandemics or if we will continue to rely on our international partners. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. I now turn to Precision Nanosystems. You have 7 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll begin by acknowledging that I'm speaking on the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation, actually, indeed, right here in Squamish, British Columbia. As chairman of Vancouver-based Precision Nanosystems, I welcome the opportunity to update the honorable members on the contributions Precision and the broader domestic biotech industry have made to keep Canadians safe during the pandemic. We're proud that our work is unlocking the potential of Canadian science and innovation. The domestic biotech and life sciences sectors are leading the development of some of the world's most innovative treatments for rare disease, infectious disease, and cancer. And this life-saving work is being done by the world-leading talent we have here in Canada. Canadian biotech and life sciences companies will play a vital role in rebuilding the economy post-COVID-19 by creating IP-intensive, knowledge-based jobs and attracting the brightest talents from around the world. Our industry allows Canadian students and young aspiring scientists to realize their potential here in Canada. Canadian innovators are very strong. Many of the innovations that are now allowing us to prevent and treat COVID-19 come from Canadian companies. And as we enter this critical period of economic recovery, we must support the homegrown Canadian firms to scale and develop the technologies and solutions to solve current and future health challenges. Investing in domestic biomanufacturing capacity is certainly part of the solution. This is an area in which the government and industry can work together to support domestic firms in developing their technologies for the benefit of all Canadians, and frankly speaking, for the entire world. We are pleased to see the government begin to chart the long-term vision of domestic biomanufacturing in partnership with the private sector. By making these investments, we'll create high-value, sustainable economic activity and build the capabilities and competencies to be prepared for the future. The question is not whether another pandemic will descend on the world. The question is, when is it going to happen? And for that, we need to be prepared. We need to be strategic in our planning because the decisions we make today will save the lives in the future. My colleague, James Taylor, will further expand on this, and I thank all the honorable members for the opportunity to address you today.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Thank you to the committee for inviting me to speak about this important and very timely topic. I understand that you've been fortunate to hear from many of my colleagues about the tremendous efforts currently being done collaboratively in Canada from government, academia, and industry to provide solutions today and better prepare us for all future pandemics. I hope my testimony today offers additional insight. Precision Nanosystems' mission is to accelerate the creation of transformative medicines that significantly impact human well-being. We work with the world's leading pharmaceutical companies to create the drugs of the future, namely genetic medicines, the delivery of RNA and DNA to cells to treat disease. As therapeutics, genetic medicines treat disease at its fundamental molecular root cause, and as vaccines, they are used to teach the immune system to protect us from a given pathogen. We are proud to provide manufacturing technologies, drug technologies, and services to enable genetic medicines to be developed to prevent and treat diseases, including cancer, rare diseases, infectious diseases, and many more indications of high unmet medical need. We founded Precision Nanosystems 10 years ago as a spinoff from the University of British Columbia with the goal of enabling the promise of genetic medicine. We now support hundreds of the world's leading biopharmaceutical companies to create these transformative medicines. We are proud to have built a highly talented and rapidly growing team of over 120 and have played an important role in training a diversified workforce in Canada and institutionalizing Canada's strong life science commitment to its citizens. COVID-19 has been devastating for individuals and the world. We should anticipate future pandemics and epidemics and prepare accordingly. We believe it is essential for Canada to secure and invest in a variety of vaccine technologies, including RNA vaccines, viral-based vaccines, protein subunit vaccines, and others. This is prudent for many reasons. Notably, the world has seen RNA medicine's disruptive capabilities and how they could rapidly be developed and deployed against COVID-19, illustrating genetic medicine's power. We see similar medical disruptions by genetic medicines across all major disease classes. And genetic medicines really represent a unique opportunity for Canada. They represent one of the fastest growing areas of pharmaceuticals, and Canada is a leader in many aspects of these technologies. Here in Vancouver, for example, is a world-leading center for technologies that deliver RNA and DNA with an expanding ecosystem consisting of local innovators and branches of large multinationals. Precision Nanosystems provides game-changing solutions for drugs being developed in areas of high unmet medical needs, such as cancer, rare diseases, and infectious diseases. We are proud to have collaborated with or provided solutions to companies, academic institutions, and not-for-profit agencies in British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, Nova Scotia, and Prince Edward Island. To solve major challenges like COVID-19, we believe that strong partnerships are required between the public and private sectors. With the Government of Canada's support, we have embarked on two key initiatives: the development of a COVID-19 vaccine and the opening of a biomanufacturing center to create domestic production capacity. Our COVID-19 vaccine program aims to develop a self-amplifying RNA vaccine that, if successful, can potentially be dosed 20 to 100 times lower than the messenger RNA vaccines currently authorized today under emergency use. By its nature, this will reduce manufacturing bottlenecks as less material is needed per dose, allowing more people to access vaccines in a shorter time. Also, the smaller dose may decrease adverse effects. We aim to enter an adaptive phase 1/2 clinical trial by this summer and to be completed by the end of this year. Our Genetic Medicine Biomanufacturing Center will be a state-of-the-art facility for developing and manufacturing genetic therapeutics and vaccines. The Biomanufacturing Center will support PNI's COVID-19 vaccine program, as well as PNI's large and growing client programs in other areas of high unmet medical need. Successful completion of this facility will produce some of the world's most innovative genetic medicines right here in Canada, and we are fostering local technology development, job creation, talent development, and rebuilding our ability to respond domestically to future pandemics. Leveraging our existing relationships and pipeline of programs, the Biomanufacturing Center will be a state-of-the-art, commercially viable facility for the most innovative genetic medicines produced here in Canada for years. Lastly, I would like to recognize and thank the government employees who have worked with us recently and over the years. Our team has interacted with many individuals who have worked tirelessly and with the utmost commitment to enable these and other important projects. Thank you. I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. I now invite Medicago to present. You have up to 7 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'll be speaking English. On behalf of Medicago, I'd like to thank you for inviting us to present at this hearing. Medicago is a Canadian biopharmaceutical company with a mission to improve health outcomes for people by using our innovative plant-based protein expression technologies for rapid response to the emerging global health threats, such as the one that we are facing today with COVID-19. We are proud to be contributing to the fight against COVID-19 by developing Made in Canada vaccine candidate, which is currently development in phase 2/3 program. We are a proud Canadian company, headquartered in Quebec City, making a significant contribution to job and investment to the national economy. Let me spend a moment to introduce our technology and its uniqueness. Our vaccine are so-called virus-like particles, called VLPs, that mimic the shape and appearance of the virus without being pathogenic. Because of its feature, it induces a very strong and broad protection through the immune system when it's introduced. Also, our plant-based production capability is extremely versatile and positioned to support rapid response to the situation like what we are facing. In our manufacturing platform, we can receive the genetic sequence information of the virus and then be applied to express the VLP candidate, vaccine candidate for rapid development that will be suitable to the situation like the pandemic what we are facing. We are currently assessing the immune response of our current program against the Wuhan strain against the emerging new variants. We are also contemplating to develop a new vaccine against the emerging new variants as well. During the current COVID-19 pandemic, Medicago has reallocated nearly all of its resources to develop a vaccine candidate and variants, and also try to accelerate our path to increase the Canada's domestic vaccine manufacturing capabilities. COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the critical need for domestic manufacturing of vaccine and other products to ensure that the Canada is prepared to protect its citizens from emerging infectious disease. Medicago is proud to provide domestic
Madame la
solutions.
Présidente, il serait opportun de demander au témoin de pouvoir relever son micro pour améliorer la qualité de son son pour la traduction. Merci.
Madam Chair, please ask the witness to raise his microphone to improve the sound quality.
So that is closer to your mouth?
Is this better?
Thank you very much.
Okay. So Medicago is proud to provide a domestic solution to respond to the pandemic, which requires support from the government at multiple levels. We have seen other jurisdictions such as US, UK, and Germany investing in local companies to provide domestic capacity in their countries. The government of Canada has kindly supported our efforts at Medicago in its development and production of COVID-19. It will ensure availability of a Canadian-made vaccine to the population and provide much needed domestic manufacturing capacity for vaccine, antibodies, and other immunotherapies. In addition, Canada's advanced purchase order of our vaccine has allowed us to reserve supplies for Canada that provides the security needed for us to pivot resources from other programs and focus on COVID-19 vaccine development and its productions. As we look to the critical factors involved in preparing for the pandemic, it may be useful to structure our response according to the three major axes: time, economics, and competencies. Pandemic response requires long-term planning, given that many years of efforts are needed. Private-public partnership provides strong synergies. While Canada needs to secure technology and domestic production capability, industry require long-term sustainability to encourage significant private investment. Competencies are also critical to ensure the domestic response from the early research to the clinical development, production, and commercializations. Government approach to investment should be focused on strengthening each link of this value chain with a strong long-term planning and commitment. Lastly, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank government leaders and partners that made this investment possible. Government of Canada, specifically Public Health Agency of Canada, Industry, Science, and Economic Development of Canada, Public Service and Procurement Canada, and Government of Quebec. We are very grateful for your support and look forward to continuing to work with the government partners to protect Canadians from the current COVID-19 outbreak and future public emergencies. I'd be happy to entertain any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we will now go to Dr. Robinière. You have 7 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
My name is Gary Kobinker. I'm a professor in infectious disease at University Laval and the former chief of the special pathogen program at the National Lab in Winnipeg. My expertise sits on the development of diagnostic tests, vaccine and therapeutics against emerging and re-emerging pathogen, as well as outbreak responses on the ground in Africa, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East. From 2003 to 2005, I've contributed to the development of the first mice model of SARS and one of the first reports on the ferrets and macaque models. In parallel, I communicated some of the first reports on the stability of the virus, SARS that is, in the environment and opportunity to contactless transmission from droplets. It is with this expertise that I'm here today to share my expertise and perspective on the subject applied to SARS-CoV-2, that is the causative agent of COVID. As a scientist and as a Canadian, I've seen unfold the emergence and spread of SARS-CoV-2 worldwide within a few months. I've witnessed, like most of us, many extraordinary achievements and some missed opportunities. I'm here to highlight some of these successes and missed opportunities because they are where we can learn and focus our effort to improve our response to save lives tomorrow, next month, and for the years to come. In 6 to 12 months, we will look behind and surely we will be able to say that we made it through okay. We could have done better, as we can always improve, but all considered, we did make it through okay. But make no mistake, not all of us will make it through at all. And for the ones that will die, for them and their families and friends, it will be dramatic losses of loved ones, changing families and friendship forever. For the most vulnerable, it will be even more dramatic as the numbers will be higher. And these are the people we must protect first. Canada and the provinces and territories have done great in regards to diagnostic services. We must acknowledge the contribution and leadership of FACT, including Dr. Tirza Tam and Matt Gilmore, who worked countless hours on decentralizing diagnostic of COVID to provinces, which in turn expanded us to hospitals. We have seen sharing of PPE within and between provinces and territories when they became more difficult to find and precious stone. We have seen protective vaccine being developed within timelines never seen before in the history of vaccination, and unexpected alliances between big pharma and academia, such as Oxford AstraZeneca, and big pharma and not-for-profit, like Merck and IV. We also have seen missed opportunities. Currently, the reality, over 1 year into this epidemic, only about 6% of the world population has limited access to vaccination. Most countries, including Canada, have delayed too long before imposing travel restriction to delay growing seeding of COVID spread throughout the country. More dramatically, the usage of masks at the population level was delayed for months, while hard data strongly indicated their benefits in reducing spread, reducing exposure doses, protecting from infection and severe disease and death. This event, even when in March 2020, some within the federal government were aware of such data and were warned that the first major mistake in emergency response is not to adapt to rapidly growing science to protect policies and politics rather than public health. Canada has been well advised to sign multiple contracts with major pharma above the number of doses required. Unfortunately, it failed to timely act from January, February 2020 and develop and implement strategy to build vaccine development and manufacturing within Canadians' borders. This did not come up in January, February, but months later in July and beyond. Like for masks, how many lives could have been saved through a more prompt reaction? We will be able to calculate soon, and each life lost will be one too many. We were at least 3 teams with experience in bringing experimental vaccine against infectious disease to the clinic in Canada. One finally received federal funding late August 2020 to initiate the clinical development, and this is Medicago. The other are also here present with the colleague in Ontario. Canada's solution now largely sitting with NRC. NRC managing the vaccine task force, managing funding to 6 promising vaccines. NRC that itself never brought a human vaccine to licensure, to my knowledge. A federal department, NRC, with approval from another federal department, Health Canada, is proposing to produce vaccine for the country's citizens, a model that exists only in authoritarian regimes or in communist countries, a ticking bomb that may well blow unless some other unexplained strategy is deployed. My group, with the vaccine strategy that we have shown works against Zika and recently MERS, another coronavirus, with the COVID vaccine ready to progress through a clinic since mid-February 2020, a vaccine that showed protection levels similar to a commercial mRNA vaccine in animals. That vaccine received 1 million, and we are very thankful. Despite the great data in preclinical studies, nothing more, zero. Now, let's be serious. Nobody on this planet can bring a vaccine through any clinical study in humans with 1 million. So we can ask whether this 1 million was well spent, considering the lack of follow-up support. How many more like this in Canada also use funding and then were left behind? How far could my group and others be today if we would have had early support like in the UK, the US, or other countries? I'm here to answer your question with my best effort. Right now, I will say this: variants are emerging. The next pandemic is lurking upon us. This is not a fear argument. It is just a simple truth. And we must do better and invest for tomorrow as the future because we can, and so we must. With my own hands, I've decontaminated and prepared for burial bodies of father and children, mother and babies, all deceased from Ebola virus disease in places without much resources. We are very lucky here in Canada with all our resources. We can work together irrespective of gender, race, political party affiliation, or religious belief. We are so very lucky to live in this amazing and wonderful country where we can recognize our gaps and where we can do better and enhance meet the most daunting challenges with the most innovative solutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we'll now go to our round of questions. Again, please respect the time because we're going to try to get at least one tour in before our two witnesses have to leave. So we will start with MP Dreeshen. You have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And because of the fact that we're going to lose a couple of the really important witnesses here, I'm just going to try to change my questions somewhat so that maybe we can get some answers later as they could send these answers to the chair. Dr. Niemer, you had mentioned how behavioral scientists were part of the mix as far as the advisors are concerned. Behavioral scientists basically look at how people are going to respond to things such as lockdowns and so on, whereas it's the mental health people that I think are really important in this issue. As the last speaker had just mentioned, we have lost so much faith and we have seen so many drastic things happening in the last number of months that I think really we have to be concerned about. And another concern, we talk about international counterparts. Last week when I did a speech, we were at 38th. We are now 58th as far as vaccine deployment is concerned. Yet we continually hear how things are just going very well. Well, they aren't going very well. And the other aspect that this comes into the science discussion. Why are we not fast tracking vaccines that have already been approved in the United Kingdom, in the US? We talk about, well, we have to wait for Health Canada to do their due diligence. We speak about how this is an international dilemma. How are we going to manage that?
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Before I expect that you want me to answer, but I just want to mention that I have rearranged my schedule and I'll be able to be with you for until 12:30, so for an additional 30 minutes. In terms of the mental health of our behavioral scientists, and we had biomedical and clinical scientists as well, were very aware and concerned about the mental health issues from the get-go. And the reality is this entire, the management of this entire pandemic was an exercise in risk management between infection, between mental health, between, keeping people at home, etc.
Thank you very much. So on that particular point, what information, advice, or studies did you or your office provide the government to suggest that quarantining travelers in a hotel would be the safest option available rather than the system that we had before, whereby travelers quarantined at home under supervision?
Well, when government asks us for evidence, they don't ask us for policy options. So we do provide the science. So in this case, it would be the science around the transmission of the disease, how long the virus stays in you, how long people can be contagious, and so on. The policy options and the decisions are entirely up to the government.
Thank you. And I agree. That is the key issue right here. We have a difference between natural science and political science. And of course, no one that is a scientist is going to say there's a 100% chance. And of course, that's when the political scientists jump in to say, hey, we'll maybe be able to deal with this in this particular way. And I want to come back to another issue when recommendation number 3 in your special task force on long-term care, the report that you had should ensure sufficient resources required to safely care for residents within long-term care homes, including personal protective equipment and testing for long-term care staff and residents. And I think we've seen how difficult this has been and how frustrating it has been. I know there's no one that I know that hasn't seen somebody pass away or issues where mental health has really caused them such grief. What response did you get from the government on the recommendations for long-term care? And did you speak to the government at all about the report?
Madam Chair, our report on long-term care was of course like other recommendations sent to the government officials, both on the political side and the bureaucratic side, but it was also made available to everyone on our website. The situation of the long term is one that distresses me a great deal. I think it distresses all Canadians. Unfortunately, in this particular instance, we had to rely on the provinces really to implement those measures in the long-term care homes, or in the cases where they were private cares, they had to be discussions between the operators and the provinces, I understand as well. So to the question as to whether we could have done better in the second wave, knowing what we knew about the virus. I think, yes, we could have done much better. We had the tools to do it with the testing, and we didn't have any need, shortages of PPEs as well.
And thank you. And of course, with that recommendation number 3, that was what you were trying to tell the federal government. I mean, they have been laying this on the feet of the provinces, I understand. Just in the short time I have, on the international acknowledgement of vaccines, what is the reason why we are holding them up at this particular point in time when they've been accepted in other parts of the world?
Again, we have a regulator, and I'm actually quite proud that unlike other countries, we don't intervene with the regulators as they do their jobs. My understanding, and this is question best posed.
Yes, and if you could quickly just finish that thought, Dr. Niemer, and then we'll go to the next.
Well, it's a question best asked of Health Canada, but my understanding is it's not only the vaccine itself, but it's also where it's produced that needs to be qualified, and the vaccines that we're getting are not coming from the same place as those going to the US and the UK, among others.
Thank you very much, Dr. Niemer. We will now go to MP Johari. You have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to all witnesses. Madam Chair, I'll be sharing my time with MP Assassi, and I ask you to keep the time. I'm going to try to stick to my 3 minutes. Let me start with Madam Niemer. Madam Niemer, in your opening remark, you talked about the focus over the last year has been on advice on COVID-19. You specifically talk about the number of initiatives that you've spearheaded, starting with the multidisciplinary advice group who's met over 40 times since March 10th. You talked about formation of CAN COVID network with over 3,000 members, and you touched on international partnership that you had a lot of conversation with, and the vaccine task force that you made the recommendation. Really want to focus my question to you on the ladder 2. Specifically, can you talk about the role that you played and how involved you are, and you continue to be on the vaccine task force, and specifically on the international partner? Is there one international partner that stood out the most, that you had the most collaboration with? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I recommended the creation of the vaccine task force because very early on it was clear that a lot of vaccine development was underway. Actually, at some point, there were over 200 vaccines at different stages of development. There was no data on any vaccine development, certainly not things about their efficacy in human and even animal models until the summer. And from my conversations with my counterparts internationally, it was clear that we're going to be running into a situation of shortages. The entire globe wants these vaccines, and it was unclear which ones are going to work. Even those countries that could produce vaccines didn't know which platforms will be available. So it was very important that we start putting in place a group that could give independent advice. Otherwise, the government would have to basically rely on private sector and others just basically lobbying to get funds and lobbying to sell their products. And I thought that maybe this is a situation where science advice would be very helpful to the country. So I was very involved with the task force. Like I said, I went to all the meetings, and especially at the ones where they studied, and we had over actually the scientists from the companies and from Canadian labs as well. And we signed confidentiality agreement to be able to look at those data and make informed decisions. I would say the countries that have similar vaccine task forces were the UK, and a little bit different, perhaps the US with their Operation Warp Speed. Australia also had a vaccine task force, and eventually France put in place as well a vaccine task force, other countries as well. So I think it was the right thing to do and the right model.
Thank you. I yield the rest of my time to MPSS.
Thank you, MP Johari. Now, if I could follow up with a question from Dr. Niemer. Speaking of the similarities in approaches, would you agree with me that the portfolio approach that Canada adopted was very similar to the approach that was adopted by the US, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, and France?
The portfolio approach adopted by Canada, yes, that aimed to basically to de-risk in case of all these unknowns was ended up being very similar to those of these countries in the sense that we bet on different technologies, and we saw it. I mean, nobody could predict that mRNA would work. I was the first to be skeptical of it, although I did my PhD in RNA synthesis. But thanks to the nanoparticles and all these developments coming together, it's been just like incredible. We didn't know whether we would be able to have vaccines to SARS-CoV-2 at all, whether adenovirus would work, whether protein subunits would work, which companies were going to be successful. Companies well established in vaccines like Merck have actually not been the first out the door, and as small innovative companies and others beat them, to the home run.
Thank you for that. Now, you did state in your opening remarks that we aggressively moved forward, and as early as March and April, we had invested in vaccine development and the development of therapeutics. However, you did say, and I quote you, "These are not trivial undertakings." Could you explain to us what those timelines are in terms of developing these things, and elaborate on that particular point for the benefit of our members?
Well, perhaps to be very succinct, historically, if one developed a vaccine or a therapeutic within 10 years, it was a great thing to happen. Developing a vaccine in the space of a year, and not only developing it, but actually mass producing it to the stage that you can vaccinate at the level that we're seeing right now is unprecedented.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry you're out of time. Notre prochain tour, c'est député Lemire. Vous avez...
Next, MP Lemire. 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thanks for the excellent job done by the interpreters. My question for Dr. Coburn, in this fight against COVID-19 and what's to come, countries have a responsibility to better prepare themselves for the next virus. As you say, the next pandemic is just a question of when. So is Canada an example, or should we be talking about a missed opportunity? Based on your experience, what would be the most effective model? There's always room for improvement. Thanks for the question. I would say that one of the big points for improvement is the lack of arm's length, or the apolitical nature of advisory bodies. And I think that Dr. Namer has done an excellent job. She's been able to move, funding backed by science, but at the same time, she is directly attached to government. And that can be seen in her statement. It was vetted by government. There's just not the independence needed. There's scientific discovery. There should, needs to be clear recommendations on communication with the public. And it'll be up to, government that makes public health policy. Thank you. Dr. Nimmer has just mentioned that there's comparison between the Canadian strategy and that of the UK. Well, there are similarities, but there are also differences. When the UK decided to put all its efforts as of mid-February, they had a meeting in Geneva amongst themselves. They invited some international colleagues. I was among them, and they decided to fully back initially 3 projects, one of which is the Vaneca vaccine that's already under production, and it's already a success, even in terms of design. The lab technology and academic nature really has all come together with the support of the government of Great Britain. So that is just one model, and that is one difference between what we're doing and Great Britain. So I'd like to take this opportunity to ask a question to Medigado. So there's talk about the manufacturing capacity in Canada. Is the Medicago model the answer when we have a lack of infrastructure and capacity in Canada?
Question is that I suppose that's a question directed to me. Okay. Yes. So, we do believe that local production capability for Canada is very important. And I do believe that, when we get into the situations where the dose allocations, I do anticipate that having the local production capability in Canada is going to be important for the people in Canada. But I also will make a point that as a company based in Canada that also operates globally, and we have a production facility and employee bases, for instance, in the US, and the current shareholders are actually Asian and European companies. So by nature, and also the virus has no national boundary. So in a way, this is a global business. And we have to make sure that we are not handicapped by the nationalism of vaccine as we try to run the business.
Vous me permettez,
Yeah, let me stop here.
If you'll allow me, it seems like the Medicago investment was lagging behind. So when it comes to federal funding, the delays, what impact does it have on you? Is the delay in government action delayed you in the fight against COVID-19?
Thank you for the question. I think the question is the relationship of the government funding and its timing versus the program that we have in place. First of all, and I'm very thankful to the government of Canada and its agencies, as well as the Quebec government for the support of what we're doing at Medicago. We do make at-risk investment, and we rely on the current shareholders and other constituencies for the funding, and certainly, we like to welcome the government support in a synergistic manner. But I will say that we've been trying to make our progress
Si,
in the
si le
program.
gouvernement fédéral vous a-
If the federal government had financed you, if you had received the money in time, could you have produced rapidly? Would we already have Medicado vaccine available to vaccine the Canadian public?
So my answer to your question is that there's two elements. We have to make a clinical development, and we also have to have the production ready. And we all make these what I call at-risk investment.
Unfortunately, you're out of time. So if you could wrap it up very quickly in 5 seconds or less.
Yeah. Any expeditious support of the government will be welcome.
Thank you very much. Our next round of questions goes to MP Garrison. You have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I'm very pleased to be in the Industry Committee, and I want to thank the witnesses for being here today. I want to take a moment at the beginning to acknowledge the efforts of the Canadian scientific and research community in diving in to try and tackle and find a solution to the COVID pandemic, and also to the efforts of Canadian-based biopharmaceutical companies. And I heard today some good suggestions of where to go forward. But my concern is that we need to know a little bit more about what happened to advice given in the past, so that we don't find ourselves 6 months from now looking back again and saying, oh my God, why didn't we do better? So I am going to ask Madam Imra a question that I'm going to try and make as clear as I can. We're 1 year into the pandemic, and we find ourselves without the capacity to produce vaccine in Canada and without the right to produce vaccines in Canada, which we've contracted for. And so my question is a simple question. Was the government advised that it would be critical to the health of Canadians to acquire the right to produce vaccines in Canada and to establish those production facilities? And if that advice was given to the government, when was that advice given?
Madam Chair, if I may, before answering the question, I would like to clarify something. My good colleague Gary Cobinger suggested that perhaps I was not the author of the text that I read and that it was vetted by government. I want to assure everyone that I wrote it with my staff. It has not been seen by anybody in government, not the political side and not any of the ranking civil servants. So it is entirely mine, and I have been completely free throughout this pandemic to express myself. To the question that's being asked of me, the answer is yes. The advice was provided about the importance of biomanufacturing in the country. When I appeared last at the early summer in front of the Health Committee, I did mention it publicly. I said that we're playing catch up and that we need to be able to produce vaccines in the country. And I think that I'll just stop there.
And can you then tell us whether you received any direct response from the government about that advice, or did you see any evidence that the government had taken that advice?
I think that government doesn't get back to me saying that, yeah, we're going to implement your advice or not. Sometimes things happen, other times things don't happen. That's the name of the game for science advisors. And of course, it's always better when we see our advice being implemented. Like I said, it's catching up doesn't happen overnight. I think that from what we've heard from the other witnesses, it's evident that the actions are being taken, and I hope that we will accelerate these actions in the months to come.
So did you, as the chief science advisor, or did the vaccine task force feel that they had the ability to ask the government to respond directly to your recommendations? Did you feel that you had that power to do so? Or did the vaccine task force feel they had the power to ask for that accountability from the government on your advice?
I think that I have never asked a government where things are happening. At times, I have asked. I saw where things were happening. My counterparts in other countries uh, do not ask government for accountability on their advice, and I knew that that's the kind of job that I signed up for.
Thank you, Madam Namer. I do think that indicates the problem of independence of your office and a lack of independence in the very attitude that is being expressed. I want to go to Professor Kobinger, who was part of the vaccine task force and had concerns about the transparency surrounding that task force. It seems to me there are two potential problems when a task force isn't transparent. One is the very narrow and direct conflict of interest of those who were involved, but the second one is the attitudinal conflict. In a group like the task force, which had many people involved in the pharmaceutical industry, there's a danger that people weren't thinking about other solutions other than those they were already involved in. And I'd like to hear Professor Kobinger on that point.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is the question that comes up more often to me, which tells you and highlight actually the lack of transparency. Otherwise, people will know and a lot of answer to many questions. Listen, I'm still learning myself of some at least apparent conflict of interest of the task force member. Again, this past Monday, I learned that some members had stock in one of the big pharma that was discussed and disclosed it as a not conflict of interest. I think one major issue is that there was no independent review of the conflict of interest that were declared. First, this committee started in July, first week of July, the first meeting, and was not known publicly until several weeks after that. Then the members were not known until several weeks after that. Then the conflict of interest were not known until several. And I'm just going to take 1 second. I want to apologize to Dr. Nemmer. I did not mean to accuse her of not writing the text and everything, but she has very, very good staff. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's the end of the first tour. With that, before I go to the next round of questions, I see Mr. Booth, you had your hand up. Are you having some technical difficulties?
No, I just had a comment regarding one of the questions, but if we're moving on, that's fine.
Perfect. So we will start the second round of questions. And I understand that Medicago has another meeting, so they have to leave. So I want to thank you very much for being with us today. And we wish you a good rest of the afternoon. What we'll do is we'll now start round two of the questions with MP Baldinelli. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all of the witnesses for appearing today. I'd like to begin my line of questioning with Dr. Namer, just following up on my NDP colleagues' questioning. Dr. Namer, as a member of the task force, I guess you're ex officio member. Are you involved in overseeing decisions made? Do you provide advice? Are you involved in the recommendations that are made?
I am involved in the sense that I participate in the meeting. I'm an active participant. I ask questions, and I provide independent advice as well, in addition to the one that is part of the vaccine task force recommendations.
Thank you. And going back again to how my colleague was asking the question earlier in regards to timelines, my concern is we lost about 3 months in the whole process in securing vaccines. I mean, the government announced a deal with CanSino Biologics in May, and then 3 days after the Prime Minister made his announcement on that, then China began the process of backing out of that agreement. We did not find out that publicly until July. The task force did not meet until June, and then the government announced its procurement of these vaccines in August. So, I mean, from your standpoint, who was involved in the decision to engage CanSino Biologics?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to clarify the CanSino. I know that there's a narrative out there about us recommending that we go with CanSino, and I just want to clarify that the deal with between NRC or the collaboration between NRC and CanSino was a research agreement. There was at no point that I'm aware of any decision or discussions about procuring preferentially the CanSino vaccine to Canadian or having it as our preferred option. At that stage, it was a collaboration to carry out early phases, phase 1 and 2 clinical trials in Canada, and that was completely separate from the vaccine task force studies of international and domestic vaccines. The timelines of the vaccine task force were, somewhat comparable to what happened in the UK. We started looking at memberships and everything around the month of April, May, vetting participants. And it was, in terms of the official announcement, that's another matter. But the UK vaccine task force was announced in the month of May. So the timelines are comparable, I would say.
Yeah. So to your point, so the recommendation of the task force for the Moderna and for the Pfizer vaccine would have been made when?
I don't remember exactly, but I think it was probably around the end of June that we had the scientists from Moderna come and present their result, and Pfizer as well. So it would be around those timelines, but I can certainly, send the specific dates when they were studied later if you wish.
But then again, we did not secure these vaccines until August with an announcement, and that, to my point, is that wasted 3 months, which is an unfortunate part. Now, I'd like to just follow up with one quick question as well. In January, Pfizer announced with its partner biotech that it was developing a booster shot to protect against the COVID variants. Just last week at the Health Committee, Dr. Roman Zumsky mentioned that the current contracts that are in place do not reference the need for boosters. Those would be new conversations that we would need to enter into with suppliers. So given this, is it important that we begin to engage with firms now, particularly firms like these Canadian firms that are here today, including universities, to begin that process?
It is my hope that the coming vaccines will be made in Canada. Whether we're going to be needing booster shots, it's really not determined yet. There are studies that suggest that it's not only the neutralizing antibodies that are important for the response, but there may be other non-neutralizing that are actually quite effective against the variants. So I would say that we need more science to determine this. Irrespective, I'm hoping that we may need the COVID vaccines for years to come, and I sure hope that we'll be able to make them in Canada.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And our next round of questions goes to MB Lambropoulos. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'd like to begin by thanking all of our witnesses for taking the time to be here with us today to answer our questions, and for all of your contributions to helping us get to the other side of the COVID-19 pandemic, at least this current phase that we're in right now. Ms. Niemer, thank you for being here and for everything that you've done so far. I'd like to ask a couple of questions. I know that you had expressed concern with delaying the second dose of the COVID-19 vaccine, as you believe that it could perhaps create or cause variants to occur or to appear. Do you still hold the same views? And have you recommended to the government of Canada to interfere in provinces where, for example, such as the province of Quebec, where they are not necessarily following guidelines that have been offered by the pharmaceutical companies?
Thank you for the question. I'd like to say that I have been in regular contact actually with my counterpart in Quebec, Rémi Quirion, and as well as the chief public health officers, and I've had direct conversations with them based on the science. And as was mentioned, the question about the first and second dose, I think there was never a question that the second dose would not be given. It's the delay. And we're seeing some studies that are coming out of Israel where they have vaccinated a large part of their population. And again, those with the Pfizer vaccine, because we have to be careful that it's not the same with all vaccines. The adenovirus based and the RNA are very different. So with the Pfizer vaccine, the studies show that there is a partial response between 50 and 70%, whereas the second dose is far more effective. So until we have proper clinical trials that are carried out using acceptable standards of consent that have gone through ethic boards, I think that we should stick with the clinical studies that were carried out.
All right, thank you. And recently, studies have shown in Europe, I believe, or in the United States, that that a single dose for people who have already tested positive for COVID-19 may be sufficient against the virus. Do you plan on doing a bit more research on this so that you can perhaps recommend to the government of Canada to recommend that one may be enough for those who have already tested positive for COVID-19 in order to help the process move a little bit more quickly?
Well, that's of course very interesting because the first dose of the vaccine is the in people who have been infected is the equivalent of the second dose in people who have never seen the virus. It is something that I actually looked into early on and had discussions with modelers in Canada and in the US as well. And because of the low rate of infection in Canada, it was deemed that such an approach, unless in settings like long-term care where we know who was infected, who wasn't, that it's actually quite cumbersome and not very efficient, given that we have less than 5% of the population that has been infected in Canada.
All right, thank you very much. And my final question would go to pretty much anybody who would like to answer it. And it's really, how do you think the government of Canada can better support science research, and how can we better help it to materialize so that it benefits Canadians in circumstances such as the one that we're living right now?
If I can offer an answer, I would say that something that is missing and that will help tremendously is a follow-up on all the projects that are receiving funding, which means that the ones that are doing very well could get more support, and the ones that are a bit delayed could be put a little bit maybe on deprioritized, if you want. This is missing from the beginning and would be a strong improvement. Thank you, from my perspective.
Mr. Booth, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I'd love to take a quick comment on that. I think importantly, it's what are the investments we're making now in order to have the capabilities to respond to pandemics in the future. I think a great question by MP Lemire about if the government would have acted a bit quicker, would we have domestic manufacturing capacity for these vaccines or therapeutics? I think the answer is no. These investments take years, if not decades, to make. So in order to ramp up the capabilities, in order to be able to have a manufacturing capabilities for biologics, for vaccines here in Canada. And we have not invested in those kind of, made those kind of investments over decades in order to have these capabilities. So I think that's important to think about. As Dr. Lemire said, the innovation that has come out of Canada that enables these types of things has been remarkable, and we need to keep investing in that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Notre prochain tour, c'est député Lemire.
Next round is MP Simard. Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question for Mr. Kobinger. I listened to you attentively, and you do well in reminding us that trial and error, that government experience has its consequences, and as legislators, we shouldn't forget this when we do our post-mortem. Now, you have talked about the solution for Canada that exists nowhere else. And this in regard to the NRC. In all of the research I've done, I thought that the most efficient model is that was put in place in Great Britain and also in Germany. We're talking about a co-development model. And I'd like to hear you on this. What kind of model should have been put in place to see quick short-term results? But thinking of the long term, maybe there are conclusions to be drawn from what has been done. I'd like to hear you on this. From my standpoint, and thanks for the question, a partnership between, industry that's already well equipped to deal with all of the challenges with vaccine production. I mean, with any kind of a partner that could come with new technology, be it academic, government, or other, these are the most rapid models, but there are other models. For example, in Brazil, with the manufacturing and development of vaccine is done based with on a non-profit and often funded by government in that they buy a vaccine from those institutions, but those institutions are entirely independent from government. That model is not just in Brazil, it's also elsewhere in other countries. And everybody knows that I'm a straight talker. I'm not attacking NRC. It's just a clarification. It's a model that I've never seen anywhere else in any of the countries mentioned. A federal government, to provide vaccine for citizens is a huge challenge.
Oui, rapidement.
Very quickly, I understand. And I understand your clarification. Now, in your opinion, sorry, we apologize. Maybe for the next round.
Questions goes to MP Garrison. You have the floor for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I want to go back to something that Madam Nimmer said, and that was that she sure hoped that domestic production would be available. So my question is, have you or the task force advised the government that creating that domestic production capacity is critical to the future health of Canada? And have you suggested that measures be taken to make sure that we have that domestic capacity?
The short answer is yes. Advice has been given on this, and I understand that the innovation science, the industry science and innovation ministry is launching consultation on a biomanufacturing strategy for Canada.
Thank you very much. Although consultation is always a good idea in this emergency, I'm a little bit worried that we're only consulting at this point. As a former member of a board of a firefighting service, I like the firefighting analogies. And I guess the situation we're in now, it seems odd to me that we know we're going to need further capacity. We know we need to build a fire hall, even if we don't know exactly where the fire's going to be. And so I'm concerned that we're not already launched on that path. So I want to ask our McMaster representatives, I think what I heard from you today is that with an investment from the federal government, we could be much farther down the path of being ready for either variants or another kind of pandemic that comes at us. So perhaps Dr. Mossman?
Yes, thanks very much for that. So, what we've been really focusing on at McMaster, and this is in collaboration with colleagues across the country, is really pulling together all of the current expertise that we have, the investments that have been made, and to really bring everyone, that's why we call it a global nexus, to really bring everyone together so that we have social scientists talking to policymakers, talking to infectious disease experts, talking to supply management, so that we can not just learn from this pandemic, but ensure that we are using the resources and identify what new resources we need to collectively make sure we are prepared for the inevitable next pandemic.
I believe I'm out of time, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much, MP Garrison. Notre prochain tour de questions.
Our next round of questions is MP Généreux. You have 5 minutes. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thanks to all the witnesses for joining us today. Ms. Nimmer, I would like to start with you. In the work you've done with the task force and the solutions you proposed to government, at what point in time, thinking back to now and to the end of March, what were your forecasts? Did you think that we would be 58th in the world for vaccine delivery, or did you think that we would be in a better position for delivery of vaccines? To be frank, I didn't even know we would have vaccine for January, February of 2021. It was a very optimistic on our parts, and that we have vaccine available is extraordinary. The vaccines that were available first are a new platform whose production is quite complex. And as I said, the scale-up is not just a question of putting water into a bigger bottle. There are hiccups. Those, were predictable. And I do, agree we might not be where we'd have liked to be, but it's not a marathon. It's not the start line that's important. It's the finish line that's important. And I'm confident that we will be able to vaccinate a lot more quickly and a lot more massively in the coming months. Very quickly, if we had made a different decision, would we have had different results? If we had decided to do domestic manufacturing such as Great Britain did, would we have more vaccine as we speak? What I observed is that the Canadian vaccine that was farthest along was Medicado. And as you see, Medicado have not yet finished their phase 3 trials. And it's too bad that Medicado had to leave our meeting, but their production, cannot be done in Canada. They did get support to develop Canadian production, but it's going to take years. So all this to say that, yes, it's urgent that we begin. But it's not a question of months away. There's a lot more time needed to develop the ecosystem to have local production, which doesn't mean we need to wait, not at all. But I think we're where we are, where we would have been anyway. If I understood that you were on the task force, Mr. Lemire, but that you withdrew or because there was a lack of transparency? Yes, says Mr. Kobinger. So you didn't say earlier that there were some members of the task force who were stock owners of companies that were chosen. Correct me if I've misunderstood or am I wrong, but there were people in the task force who were in conflict of interest. Answer: yes, that is my understanding. And is that what you wanted to denounce when you quit the task force? No, denounce, no. I just did not want to be associated with a group, that had, where there were substantive problems. What were the substantive problems? Lack of transparency. It was formed and it became public almost by accident, and then the members, weren't announced until later, and then there was talk about they're all volunteers, so we don't have to provide more information. That's not only do we have to volunteer time, but we need to be accountable. And if you have conflict of interest, you need to declare them. So, and then you have to be able to say, yes, those members are still all right because their conflict of interest has been declared. So there are people who lose their jobs for less than that, I can tell you. But my interest is that some countries did decide on domestic production, and we have some totalitarian countries that adopted very different models. Russia, we talked about Russia, but They're selling vaccine all around the world now, but we've never heard about their vaccine in Canada. We're talking about purchasing vaccine produced in India. And then I've understood that in South Africa and even in France, my understanding is some of these vaccines will not be authorized. What do you think of all this? Mr. Généreux, you're out of time in this round. I'm sorry. The rules apply to everybody. So next round, MP Nasasi, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Now, if I could return to Dr. Niemer. Dr. Niemer, thank you for putting everything in context for us today. You rightly pointed out that we shouldn't be so concerned with the starting line, but the end line of vaccination in this country. You also confirmed that, in your professional opinion, every Canadian who would like to be vaccinated will be vaccinated by the end of September. Could you tell us what the basis for your optimism is?
The basis for my optimism is that we're seeing the issues of scale up being worked out at the mRNA vaccine suppliers that we have that we have purchased. We have also purchased other vaccines, notably two that are adenovirus based. That's AstraZeneca and Johnson and Johnson, whose results are excellent and, as been mentioned, have been approved in other countries, at least in the case of AstraZeneca. Johnson and Johnson is being studied both in Canada and the US for approval. And the adenovirus is a much easier production and easier to scale up. So we shouldn't expect a lot of hiccups there. But anyway, there will be additional doses. And last but not least is the Novavax, which is the protein subunit that as well has shown great results, and the production should be easier. So we should be getting 3 additional vaccines in the coming months for Canada. And already based only on the RNA vaccine, we have enough doses to vaccinate people who wants to be vaccinated by September. That's the basis of my optimism. I do have to mention, though, that we do need to have the logistics in place to achieve all this.
Thank you. Now, you've set the record straight in terms of supplies of vaccine, but there's also the logistics and the administration of those vaccines. Yesterday, the residents of Ontario actually learned that their province here in Ontario is behind the other provinces in terms of rolling out vaccinations. Now, I take note of the fact that 2 weeks ago, you publicly expressed concerns about how the provinces had just essentially stockpiled rapid testing and that they were just gathering dust. Do you have the same concerns with respect to the rollout? And how do we know that all of the provinces, including Ontario, are ready to administer at an expeditious pace?
Of course, I'm not privy to the logistic details in the provinces. I will say that in terms of the difference between the rapid test and the vaccines, the rapid test, there was a reluctance to use existing tests that actually did not require other supplies than the tests themselves. In the case of vaccines, of course, you have to set up the places where people can be vaccinated, the entire logistics for people to arrive, to receive the vaccine, the vaccines to be available, and so on. So the needles, we heard a lot about these things. So I think that when the different jurisdictions provide the details of their logistics, I think this is when we're able to tell whether things are going to go well or not. So I don't have any other insight into this.
And in the event a province such as Ontario, given all the information we've obtained, falls behind the other provinces and other jurisdictions, what would you recommend the federal government to do to make sure that the rollout happens as quickly as possible in places such as Ontario?
I think vaccinations for Canadians is a national issue. I think it's really important that we all help each others, and if provinces need support, depending with what is, if it's healthcare workers or data systems or others, I think that we should be able to provide this help and support. And I think we showed that in the past with PPEs and so on, we're able to help each others.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that ends our second round. Before we start with the third round, I'd like to thank Dr. Nemer for being with us and for extending your time with us today and for your testimony. It has been very helpful. Thank you so much for what you're doing to assist us in this pandemic. With that, I'll start the third round. We should be able to get through the third round by so everyone can get a slot. With that, I will start with MP Dreeshen. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair. And of course, I've just heard this story that the starting line doesn't matter much. Well, it does matter. It's $30 billion of debt each month that we are going through right now. Job losses, businesses going under. The starting line does matter. And I think that's really one of the things. This is the reason why we're 58th in the world instead of where we normally would be, which is probably in the top 10. So that's the way Canada has been in the past. Now, we also know that we can't ramp up development of our own Canadian vaccines in time. But therefore, we should have been aggressively procuring vaccines last spring, and there has to be a reason why we're so far down the line. But what I'd like to know, if someone can explain to me why the government seems to be so comforted by procuring hundreds of millions of doses by next year, that they've gone out and made all of these deals. Because if we need these many for a future date, why aren't we relying on our own new domestic supply to produce these? So if it looks as though we can produce a bunch in the next little while, why then are we continuing to talk so comforting about that? And the other final question, and then I'll pass the questions off to Mr. Baldinelli. What is the shelf life of each of these vaccines that we have? And perhaps only those that are producing or looking at production here in Canada can answer that. So I'm not sure who would like to jump in on that, but if there could be a little bit of discussion on those things.
So witnesses, please just jump in.
This is Gary. I fully agree with you. The start line does matter because the faster we go and the sooner we go, the faster we get to the end. And I somehow disagree that it takes years and years. We have seen great innovation and great realization across the world. I think in Canada we can do the same. I think we're up to the task. I think the colleagues all across Canada are up to the task. And yeah, I fully agree with you. Thank you.
Actually, I just comment. I also agree that the start line matters and how quickly you get up to speed. The finish line, of course, also matters, but and the combination of changes of behavior, availability of rapid diagnostics, availability of therapeutics, and availability of vaccines are all very important tools, and we need to use all of them. It's not one or the other. We need a combination of all of those tools together. And I would say in Canada, the approval of these vaccines absolutely has to happen more quickly. Not only the federal approval and the therapeutics, and not only the federal approval, but then also the use of them in being drawn down by the provinces. We have approved antibody-based therapeutics approved by Health Canada that are not being deployed and not being used by the provinces. And I know that the Therapeutics Task Force has also got opinions on that they do believe those are being underutilized, and they definitely need to be rolled out as quickly as possible. On the shelf life of these vaccines, they're very stable, although I'll pass it back over to James, who's maybe more of a technical expert on that.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, the stability, I think, is not going to be the limiting factor. I think the using up supply will be the limiting factor for these vaccines. So at this point in time.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I'll yield the rest of my time to Mr. Baldinelli.
Thank you, Chair. Quickly, I'd like to go to the witnesses from McMaster University and just ask the question. As we know, some of the variants of COVID-19 have drastically reduced the effectiveness of some of the vaccines. So, is there a role that McMaster is playing in researching, and could it produce booster vaccines in the future as we move into the future?
Maybe I'll take that one. The answer is yes, we're working on this. As it was pointed out earlier, neutralizing antibodies are very important, but that's what the variants are likely to escape. We and others are designing vaccines that induce cellular immunity against more highly conserved portions of the virus. It remains to be seen whether that leads to a level of protection that at least keeps people out of the hospital or prevents extensive spread or reduces spread. And we're addressing those questions right now in animal models at our facility, and boosting existing vaccine or people with pre-existing immunity is the goal of our clinical trial.
Thank you very much. Our next round of questions goes to MP Erskine Smith. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thanks very much. Mr. Cobinger, I want to take time with you because you have said today that you speak directly and you have been critical in some ways, but you have a great expertise. And I read an article recently in the National Post, and it's a common talking point that I've heard from constituents at times who are quite frustrated in relation to CanSino, and that it distracted other efforts. And we heard from the Public Health Agency of Canada as it relates to the investment in Medicago and as it relates to the investment in the Saskatchewan facility, that these investments actually predated the work with CanSino. And so I'm wondering what your thoughts are. Do you think that was a distraction, or it was one among many efforts and it was a worthwhile effort at the time?
I thank you for the question. I think what's a bit alarming right now is the different narrative about CanSino and how it really became to be a project. And we just heard from Dr. Nemmer that it was a research project. I would challenge that. This is the first written recommendation I've seen from the task force was the CanSino. And I remember vividly because my first reflex was that to think, well, we have not discussed CanSino in a way with like the other one where we had an exchange with the company, and so I didn't know where this recommendation came from. Honestly, it was in writing to the government, and then this same recommendation was turned around 180 degrees, then to not recommend the CanSino after the doses couldn't be obtained, and so. I don't know. This CanSino issue was it a distraction? I think so. Was this scientifically sound? I don't think so at all. Canada was the only one, by the way, in the West to identify that as a possible candidate.
But can I ask? But on that point, can I ask, because it's held out, so maybe criticism is warranted in relation to pursuing it at all, perhaps. But when I read the history, the suggestion that we put all our eggs in one basket and that because we invested in this, we then weren't cutting deals with other companies or investing in other companies. Is that a fair assessment?
No, I don't think that. I think that the federal government can do more than one thing at a time. Actually, this is why I believe that the signing contract with Big Pharma was the right thing to do, and at the same time to prioritize innovation and production of vaccine within our borders was also a
pause on that, because I completely agree with that. And then the other frustration I had with this National Post article, as I was going back and forth with those with concerns about the lack of progress in some ways here in Canada, it held out the prospect of Providence as a real solution. And I think we've right to invest for the medium term in Providence and mRNA here in Canada. But credibly, you're the expert. If we'd invested in Providence, is there any likelihood that vaccine would have been online to help Canadians in the course of the pandemic in the short term?
I don't know enough of their capacity, honestly, but I do believe that's at least 2 platforms, maybe 3 in Canada could have been online by now if there would have been the right amount of support behind them.
And is one of those AstraZeneca? Because when I look at sort of what the coulda, shoulda, woulda, what could have happened with the benefit of hindsight, but I am an entire novice. I look at a deal cut with the UK at the end of April in terms of an investment into partnership with Oxford and AstraZeneca. And is that something that you think could have been pursued more seriously in partnership with the NRC or otherwise?
Yeah, maybe as one additional, but I think the colleagues from McMaster have a very good capacity there, and I think with support from the beginning, they could have done miracles, honestly, and others in Canada as well, which are the other two I have in mind.
And we are where we are now, and clearly the portfolio approach in the short term and the build out domestic capacity in the medium term has been the overwhelming recommendation. We heard it from the co-chairs of the vaccine task force when they attended. What recommendations would you have for this committee on a going forward basis? Not to criticize what's come before, but what recommendations should we be making to government to make sure we are putting ourselves on the firmest footing going forward?
As I said, I think advisory board that are independent of the government, irrespective of which government, and of course we are on this discussion, and we sense there is a little bit of partisanship at play, and I guess it's normal in your line of work. But again, I think it's also expected, or Canadian one expect that people work together to find solutions.
I appreciate that. The only thing I would say, it's held out this UK task force did a much better job in some ways, is what some commentators say. Though I would note that there is a very strong connection between the chair of that task force and one of the government ministers in the UK. And so they're the same concerns that were raised initially, and yet they did a very good job. So some of these concerns don't necessarily preclude a task force from doing an excellent job in the end. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Notre prochain tour, c'est député.
Our next round, MP Lemire, 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. My question for Mr. Kobinger. You mentioned the issue of conflict of interest in answer to my colleague Généreus's question. Can you tell us more about conflict of interest as experienced by the expert group? So what mechanisms need to be put in place to ensure transparency between a task force and other groups of experts? I imagine that it's often a question of opinion. My opinion is that an expert group, must not have conflict of interest, and that needs to be examined by another arms-length group. We all have activities, right, left, and center. We all potentially have conflict of interest to some extent. So conflict of interest is a question of how well you manage them. For the task force, by using the argument of making the conflict of interest public is a problem, but saying that there is no conflict of interest when they had pharmaceutical company shares is problematic. You have to resolve that through transparency and accountability. Transparency. I suggested that to have media people attend all meetings, to have meetings recorded minimally, and anybody be able to phone. You need another level of transparency. It's crucial with vaccines. So you're talking about a protocol or a way to know publicly what the work of the task force is. Would the task force need to render or make public its meeting minutes, for instance? Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Our next round of questions goes to MP Garrison. You have the floor for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I have to say, I'm always concerned when senior public servants like Madam Lemire don't have sufficient time to spend with parliamentary committees. And I have more things I would like to discuss that involve her. And it always seems kind of poor form to do so after the person's left the meeting. However, I think we have, of course, the well-known problem in public of people becoming tired of the epidemic and therefore not behaving as their best selves or their best citizens. But I think we have another problem, and that I would call that COVID complacency, in that we are now starting to hear that, well, we're doing our best. And for me, that's very cold comfort for people in my riding who are still continuing to lose loved ones. And I have a very tourism-dependent riding. It's very cold comfort to those employed in the tourism industry are losing their jobs and losing their small businesses because we haven't made enough progress against COVID. And the question I would have asked, and I will ask the question, although I think Madam Nuriswan is here, the task force advised the government on contracts with the major companies like Pfizer. And in those contracts, I'm afraid we don't have assurances that if there's a third wave or requires a change of vaccines, those contracts, as we've seen with the EU, only specify best efforts from the companies. They're not actually contracts to provide certain amounts of vaccine by a certain date. Maybe Professor Kobinger knows a bit more about this, but I am concerned. Without being alarmist, I'm concerned that things could still go very wrong here in terms of vaccine deliveries. So, Professor Kobinger, on the issue of contracts, and are they contracts for delivery?
Maybe that's highlight another issue. Thank you for asking. But the issue is that these contracts are confidential. Nobody has access to them, and it's an issue that is not only on the vaccine side, but all the pharmaceutical industry that is dealing with provinces independently. And I think it highlights another thing is that as long as we Canadians don't produce more of those tools, the drugs and vaccine, we are in the little seat in these negotiations. Thank you.
I will say that in the case of therapeutics, so I've been familiar, Eli Lilly, who has produced an antibody-based therapeutic for the treatment of COVID-19, of which it has been used hundreds of thousands of times in the U.S. They are distributing it on an as-need basis and globally to Germany, to France, to Israel, to other locations. And so, I think that approach on there's going to be when there's a supply problem, there will be some sort of on an as-need basis that in terms of allocating distribution.
Thank you very much. That's the end of the time. And just MP Garrison, just in terms of transparency, I did mention at the beginning of this meeting what time Dr. Niemer had to leave, and you've had 2 rounds of questions in advance of this one, that if you had a question specifically for her, you could have asked it then. So just in terms of transparency.
Well, with respect, Madam Chair, the committee meeting was scheduled for a full 2 hours, and my concern is that the chief science officer need to be available for that full time, not whether I had opportunities to question her in various rounds.
The invite
the government
was
and
sent.
all the public servants must be
MP
accountable
Garrison?
to Parliament.
MP Garrison, we're now going to the next round of questions. Thank you. The next round goes to the Conservative Party, and my apologies, I do not have a name of who is next on the list. MP Généreux?
Yep, bonjour.
Vous avez 5 minutes, merci.
You have 5 minutes. Mr. Conjure, I want to come back to the CanSino issue. Earlier, I heard the chief science advisor, Madame Nemmer, say one thing, and you seem to say the contrary. In your recollection, what were the dates when the task force approved the dates when the task force approved CanSino, and at what date was it withdrawn? I'm trying to find the dates on my calendar, but I don't have the right document with me. The announcement was made public prior to the task force starting to discuss, before the task force had its first meeting, which was dedicated to conflict of interest. So the deal was already done. But what are we talking about, around June? No, the announcement was prior to the first meeting, which was at end of June, beginning of July. My recollection, when I saw the first recommendation on CanSino, we were thinking July, August. Then it was withdrawn in August. The recommendation was withdrawn. Somebody must have the timelines. I will look into it. Yes, if you could put your hand on those dates, could you please send them to the committee? But the timeline, we set it earlier, the start line, February, beginning of March of last year, right through today. Now we're 58th worldwide in vaccine delivery. So we can pat ourselves on the back and say we're doing a good job, but in reality, being 58th, a developed country like Canada, and we even have given vaccine to COVAX, and then we've ended up having to serve ourselves some COVAX. What is your opinion about all this from the start time when all of the talks, all the agreements got signed compared to today, where we are at today? What is your opinion on what's unfolded? I think that, we are sowing the seeds, that we planted. I tried to underscore all of the good things, the fantastic things that were done. However, if we want to improve things for the next time, we need to identify what we can improve. And that means we missed out on opportunities. And it means that CanSino was, a mess, even scientifically. It was a problem. I think it was a conflict of interest for one of the co-chairs of the task force. And you mentioned 58th. It's unfortunate. We should not be 58th. And as to my opinion, what I find even more unfortunate is the disconnect between what you hear, for example, from Madame Nemer, and that's it's as if everything is going fine. Same with NRC last Monday, like everything is under control. But then, when you look out there in the field, it's not what's happening. People do not have access to vaccine. People are dying. Healthcare workers are dying. Because of what I think are deaths that could have been avoidable. We have to recognize that. We have to look at it in the face to correct things for the future so people are not dying. Thank you. Madam Chair, I have a bit of time left. I want to come back to the CanSino deal. I mean, it was stopped or called off, whatever you want to call that. I mean, you mentioned that one can walk and chew gum at the same time, and that's what Canada's done. Now, I know there was so much, goodwill and good faith. Everybody who's worked on the file from the beginning, they have made every effort possible. But I do think the start line and the line where we are today, or the timeline where we're at, we have to draw some lessons from it all. So where should we have, or where do we need to make corrections so we don't repeat the same mistake in the future? Certainly coordination. The advisory groups, how they work, and whatever the government in place is, we need a better structure. We need better coordination when you decide to invest, especially the future generations. When you decide to invest for the future, it takes follow-up in real time. Thank you. Thank you very much.
This goes to MP Jacek. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all our witnesses for your testimony today, and in fact for your enthusiasm for what Canada has to offer the world in terms of vaccine production and therapeutics. Now, I'd like to quote from a previous witness, however. Some of you may know him, and this is what he said. This is Professor Ataran at our meeting on February 16th. He said, "It is Canada is simply the least scientifically competent country I've ever come across." Dr. Mossman, could you please, as an academic, tell me what you think of the scientific competence here in Canada?
I would actually disagree. I would think that we are incredibly competent across the country. We have experts at all of our universities, and in many ways and in many aspects, Canadian scientists lead. I think what we're seeing here is that ability to bring everyone together and to integrate all of that knowledge in a way that's really focused on the task at hand. And that is something that I think is a good outcome of the pandemic. We have learned to be much more open, much more transparent, much more collaborative. But I would argue that we do have some of the top researchers and capabilities in the country.
And if I could I add to that point, please?
It is actually my time,
Oh.
Mr. Taylor.
Sorry.
I'd like to follow up on the issue of collaboration with you, Dr. Mossman, and potentially with you, Mr. Taylor. I was most interested in hearing what you had to say. Dr. Niemer told us that in her view or to her knowledge, there were some 200 vaccines under potential development in Canada. So the task force had a mammoth task, presumably to filter through all these and look at clinical data and so on. Would you not see collaboration between proponents, academia, manufacturing facilities as a way forward? And could you elaborate on how that might be operationalized?
Absolutely. And this is, thank you for that question. This is exactly what we are proposing with the Canada's Global Nexus, is to bring together not just academics, but industry, public health, government organizations to do exactly that, so that we are working and leveraging all of the knowledge and infrastructure in a really systematic and collaborative way. So that is exactly what Canada's Global Nexus is all about.
Mr. Taylor, would you like to comment since you are so enthusiastic?
Thank you very much. Yes, I would like to comment, and I think the questions around Canadian scientific abilities are not correct. For some examples, for example, the leading antibody therapeutic was developed here in Canada. The leading technologies for the delivery of the RNA vaccines were developed here in Canada. So, Canada has tremendous scientific abilities, and I think as this panel is very helpful for understanding what could have done better or what happened. But I think also we should be looking at what unique opportunities have arisen out of this crisis. And in times of crisis, interesting things happen. And we've seen technologies like the ones that we're involved in and others in Canada and other good companies and institutions and academics around, say, RNA vaccines or other vaccine technologies. And we should be thinking hard about how do we capitalize on this opportunity in addition to trying to get through the current major challenge we have and really building the Canada we want for the future around these new abilities.
Thank you. And I have a little time left, I believe. I'd like to turn to Dr. Kobinger. When I read the conflict of interest protocol for the vaccine task force, to me, at least what I see on paper, it is very robust. And I'm wondering if you could actually explain the particular breach that you feel has been made with those conflict of interest guidelines. As an example, at the start of each meeting, co-chairs ask members to declare any conflicts with the agenda items, and they are asked to recuse themselves. As an example, was that actually enacted in the time that you were on the task force?
I believe it was. That being said, I was surprised and somehow alarmed, honestly, to discover conflict of interest that I didn't remember hearing during this meeting publicly, including, for example, from one of the member that the institution was receiving millions of dollars, and the claim was that she was not in conflict of interest because it was not her receiving the money in her pocket. But the process, I think, was in place. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that brings us to the end of the third round. I'd like to thank all of the witnesses and our MPs today for excellent questions, excellent testimony. This has been very helpful for us. With that, I will bid you adieu and thank you for your time today. Before we adjourn, I just want to remind the members of Parliament, if you could please get your witness lists for the aerospace industry study to the clerk, preferably by end of day tomorrow, so that we can start inviting folks and making sure that the headsets that they require have time to actually get to them. So please send your lists to the clerk in priority order, preferably. It doesn't need to be a complete list. If you have additional members that you'd like, witnesses you'd like to include after, feel free to send those along. Again, thank you to the clerk, to our analysts, to everyone in that room that makes everything that we do possible. Au service de traduction, j'apprécie énormément votre travail.
Thank you to the interpreters.
Merci.